Rosa Martinez had been cleaning houses for 23 years. But nothing had prepared her for what she was about to hear on this beautiful Saturday morning. The Wellington mansion stood like a castle on the hill, its white columns gleaming, in the early sunlight. Today was supposed to be the happiest day in the house's history. Cassandra Wellington was getting married to tech billionaire James Morrison in just 6 hours. Rosa started her day at 5 in the morning, just like always. She unlocked the staff entrance with her key, the same key the Wellingtons had trusted her with for the past 15 years. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the main hallway. She loved these peaceful moments before everyone woke up. It gave her time to think about her daughter Sophia, who was now a nurse thanks to the steady job the Wellingtons had given her. The bride's room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the garden where white roses bloomed in perfect rows. Rosa had spent the previous evening making sure everything was spotless. The wedding dress hung on the special hook near the window, a creation that cost more than Rosa made in 2 years. Tiny crystals caught the morning light and threw rainbow patterns across the cream-colored walls. Rosa began her work quietly, dusting the antique furniture and arranging the fresh flowers she had picked from the garden. The bride had requested white lilies and baby's breath for her room. As Rosa placed the last lily in the crystal vase, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Cassandra was awake earlier than expected, not wanting to disturb the bride on her special day. Rosa quickly moved behind the large wooden armoire that stood against the far wall. She had learned over the years that wealthy people preferred not to see the help, especially during important moments. She would wait until Cassandra left the room, then finish her work. Cassandra entered talking loudly on her phone. Her voice carried across the room with the confidence of someone who had never worried about being overheard by staff. Rosa crouched behind the armoire, feeling awkward but trapped. She couldn't leave without being seen, and she didn't want to embarrass the bride. "Victoria, you should see this place," Cassandra was saying to whoever was on the other end. "The flowers alone probably cost more than most people's cars. James really went all out for this circus." Rosa frowned. "Circus? That seemed like an odd way to describe your own wedding." She tried to make herself smaller behind the furniture, hoping Cassandra would finish her call quickly. "Oh, please, you know exactly why I'm doing this," Cassandra continued, her voice taking on a tone Rosa had never heard before. It was cold, calculating. "James Morrison is worth $200 million. $200 million, Victoria. Do you know what I could do with half of that?" Rosa's hands stopped moving. Half of what? She felt her heart start beating faster. The prenup? What prenup? Cassandra laughed, a sound that made Rosa's skin crawl. "Sweet, naive James thinks love conquers all. He refused to make me sign anything, said it would hurt my feelings and show he didn't trust me. Can you believe how perfect this is?" Rosa pressed, her back against the wall, wishing she could disappear. This conversation was not meant for her ears, but she was trapped. She closed her eyes and tried to focus on her breathing, hoping Cassandra would hang up soon. 2 years, Victoria. That's all I need. 2 years of playing the loving wife. Then I'll file for divorce. In this state, I'll get half of everything. That's $100 million for 24 months of work. Not bad, right? The flower vase in Rosa's hands started to shake. She gripped it tighter, afraid it might slip and crash to the floor. This couldn't be real. James Morrison was one of the kindest men she had ever met. When her husband had gotten sick 3 years ago, James had personally paid for his surgery without being asked. He remembered Rosa's birthday every year and always asked about Sophia's progress in nursing school. "You should see how he looks at me," Cassandra continued, now pacing around the room. "Like I'm some kind of angel. It's almost sad, really. He actually thinks I love him. He has no idea that the only thing I love about him is his bank account." Rosa felt sick to her stomach. She thought about James. probably getting ready in his own room right now, nervous and excited about marrying the woman he loved. She thought about the way his face lit up whenever he talked about Cassandra. How he had shown Rosa the engagement ring 3 months ago like an excited teenager. "Trust me, this tech nerd won't know what hit him," Cassandra said with another cruel laugh. "By the time I'm done with him, he'll be lucky to keep half his fortune. And the best part? Everyone will think he was the one who messed up the marriage. I'm very good at playing the victim." Rosa's mind raced. She had to do something, but what? Who would believe a housekeeper over a wealthy socialite? And if she spoke up, she would lose her job for sure. The Wellingtons would never forgive her for eavesdropping on such a private conversation. But how could she stay quiet while a good man walked into such a terrible trap? "The ceremony starts at 2, Cassandra was saying. "By 2:30, I'll officially be Mrs. James Morrison, and my financial future will be secure. This is the best business deal I've ever made." Business deal? Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. That's all this was to Cassandra. A business deal. Not love, not partnership, not the beautiful beginning James thought it was. Just money. "I have to go get ready now," Cassandra said. "The makeup artist will be here soon, and I need to practice looking like a woman in love. Wish me luck at my performance today." Rosa heard the phone call end, followed by the sound of Cassandra's heels clicking across the hardwood floor toward the bathroom. The door closed with a soft click, and Rosa finally felt safe to move. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking from crouching for so long. Her mind was spinning with everything she had heard. In 6 hours, James Morrison would marry a woman who saw him as nothing more than a source of money. In 2 years, his heart would be broken and his fortune cut in half. Rosa looked at the wedding dress hanging near the window. It was beautiful, but now it seemed like a costume for the performance Cassandra had mentioned. She thought about all the guests who would arrive soon, all the people who would witness what they thought was a love story, but was actually an elaborate lie. She picked up her cleaning supplies with trembling hands. She had work to finish, but her mind wasn't on dusting or arranging flowers anymore. All she could think about was James's kind face and Cassandra's cold voice saying, "This tech nerd won't know what hit him." Rosa Martinez had always been taught to mind her own business, to work hard and stay quiet. But as she left the bride's room that morning, she knew that some secrets were too important to keep. The question was, what could a housekeeper possibly do to stop a wealthy woman's cruel plan? The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times. 5 hours until the wedding. 5 hours to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. 5 hours to choose between her job security and her conscience. Rosa walked down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind her, she could hear Cassandra humming in the bathroom, probably practicing her happy bride smile in the mirror. The sound made Rosa's stomach turn. How could someone be so heartless? As she reached the kitchen, Rosa saw the wedding cake sitting on the marble counter, 3 layers of perfection topped with sugar flowers. Even the cake was part of the lie. Everything about this day was built on deception, and only Rosa knew the truth. She set down her supplies and leaned against the counter, trying to figure out what to do next. One thing was certain. This wedding day was not going to go the way Cassandra Wellington had planned. Rosa's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she walked to the staff quarters behind the main house. Her mind kept replaying Cassandra's cruel words over and over like a broken record. "This tech nerd won't know what hit him." The phrase made her feel sick every time she remembered it. The staff quarters were quiet at this hour. Most of the other workers would arrive later to help with wedding preparations. Rosa sat down heavily on her small bed and stared at the photo on her nightstand. It showed her daughter Sophia in her white nursing uniform, smiling proudly on graduation day. Right next to it was another photo of her late husband, Miguel, taken just before he got sick. Rosa picked up Miguel's photo with trembling fingers. "What would you do, mi amor?" she whispered to the picture. Miguel had always been the brave one in their family. When their landlord tried to cheat them out of their security deposit, Miguel had stood up to him. When Sophia's teacher said she wasn't smart enough for nursing school, Miguel had fought to get her into advanced classes. But Miguel wasn't here anymore, and Rosa had to make this impossible choice alone. She thought about everything the Wellington family had done for her over the years. When Sophia needed money for college, Mrs. Wellington had given Rosa extra cleaning jobs and recommended her to wealthy friends. When Miguel was dying and the medical bills kept piling up, the family had quietly helped without making Rosa feel like charity. But it wasn't really the Wellington family she owed, was it? It was James Morrison who had paid for Miguel's surgery. James, who had insisted on giving Rosa a Christmas bonus every year. James, who always stopped to ask how she was doing, not just giving her a quick nod like most rich people did to their staff. Rosa walked to her small window and looked across the garden toward the main house. She could see people starting to arrive, the florist, the photographer, the catering staff. Everyone was preparing for what they thought would be a beautiful celebration of love. Only Rosa knew it was really a cruel business transaction. She tried to imagine telling someone what she had heard. Who would believe her? If she went to Mrs. Wellington, Cassandra's mother would probably think Rosa was making up stories to cause trouble. Rich families protected each other, even when one of them was wrong. What if she tried to tell James directly? Rosa pictured herself walking up to the groom and saying, "Excuse me, Mr. Morrison, but your bride is only marrying you for your money." He would think she was crazy. Worse, he might think she was jealous or trying to hurt Cassandra for some personal reason. Rosa remembered something that had happened 5 years ago. Another housekeeper named Carmen had tried to tell a family that their teenage son was stealing money from his mother's purse. Even though Carmen was telling the truth, the family had fired her immediately. They said she was causing drama and couldn't be trusted. Carmen had never found another good job after that. The thought of losing her job made Rosa's chest tight with panic. This position wasn't just work for her, it was everything. The steady paycheck, the small apartment behind the house, the health insurance that had saved Miguel's life for a few extra months. Without this job, she would have nothing. But then she thought about James again. 3 months ago, when he had shown her the engagement ring, his eyes had been so bright with happiness. "I never thought I'd find someone like Cassandra," he had told Rosa while she dusted his office. "She makes me feel like the luckiest man alive." Rosa had smiled and congratulated him, thinking how nice it was to see such a kind man find love. Now she knew that Cassandra was counting on that kindness, planning to use it against him. As the morning went on, Rosa tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering. She cleaned the guest bathrooms while wedding guests started arriving and checking into their rooms. She polished the silverware while listening to Cassandra laugh with her bridesmaids in the next room. Every sound of happiness felt like a lie now. Around 10 o'clock, Rosa was arranging flowers in the main hallway when she saw James walking down the stairs. He was already dressed in his wedding suit, looking nervous but excited. When he saw Rosa, his face lit up with that genuine smile she had come to know so well. "Rosa, how are you doing today?" he asked, stopping to talk with her like he always did. "I know this wedding is creating a lot of extra work for everyone. I really appreciate everything you're doing to make this day special." Rosa felt her throat close up. Here was this good man, thanking her for helping with his own destruction. "It's my pleasure, Mr. James," she managed to say. "You look very handsome today." "I'm so nervous," James laughed, adjusting his tie for the 100th time. "I keep thinking, I'm going to trip walking down the aisle or forget my vows. Cassandra probably thinks she's marrying a complete mess." If only he knew what Cassandra really thought about him, Rosa thought sadly. She wanted so badly to warn him, but the words stuck in her throat like cement. "Don't worry. she said instead. "Everything will be perfect." James smiled and patted her shoulder gently. "Thanks, Rosa. You always know how to make people feel better." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and thank you for taking such good care of Cassandra's room this morning. She mentioned how lovely the flowers looked." Rosa's blood turned cold. Cassandra had been in her room when Rosa was behind the armoire. Did she know Rosa had heard the phone call? Was she testing Rosa somehow? "She said that?" Rosa asked carefully. "Yes, she was very happy with everything. She said you have a real talent for making things beautiful." James's smile was so trusting, so innocent. "I'm glad she appreciates how hard you work." After James left, Rosa felt even more confused and scared. If Cassandra suspected that Rosa had overheard something, Rosa's job might already be in danger. But if Cassandra didn't know, then Rosa still had time to figure out what to do. Rosa spent the next hour cleaning the dining room while her mind raced through different scenarios. She could pretend she never heard anything and let the wedding happen. James would be happy for a while, at least until Cassandra decided to divorce him. But knowing what she knew, could Rosa really look at his trusting face and say nothing? She could try to find proof of Cassandra's plan somehow. But how? The phone call Rosa had overheard was just words in the air. She had no recording, no written evidence, nothing that would convince anyone. She could quit her job today and leave before the wedding. That way, she wouldn't have to watch James get trapped, but she also wouldn't do anything to help him. Rosa knew she would hate herself forever if she took the coward's way out. Around noon, Rosa was dusting the library when she overheard two of Cassandra's friends talking in the hallway. "I still can't believe Cassandra is actually going through with this," one of them was saying. "I mean, James is sweet, but he's so ordinary." "Are you kidding?" the other friend replied. "Do you know how much money he has? Cassandra hit the jackpot. She'll be set for life." "True, but 2 or 3 years pretending to be in love with him. I don't know if I could do it. Cassandra can do anything for that kind of money. Besides, it's not like she has to stay married to him forever." Rosa dropped her dustcloth. Even Cassandra's friends knew this was a fake marriage for money. How many people were in on this cruel joke? How many people were laughing behind James's back while he planned the happiest day of his life? That's when Rosa made her decision. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't watch a good man get destroyed by someone who saw him as nothing more than a bank account. She didn't know how she would do it, and she didn't know what would happen to her afterward, but she had to try to save James Morrison. Rosa picked up her dust cloth with steady hands for the first time all day. She had 4 hours until the wedding ceremony. 4 hours to figure out how a housekeeper could stop a rich woman's evil plan. 4 hours to find the courage Miguel would have wanted her to have. The grandfather clock chimed 12 times, echoing through the house like a countdown. Rosa took a deep breath and got back to work. She had a wedding to stop. Rosa's heart pounded as she walked back toward the main house. She had made her decision, but now she needed a plan. How could she possibly convince anyone that Cassandra was a fraud? Her word alone would never be enough, especially against someone with so much money and influence. As she climbed the servants' staircase to the second floor, Rosa remembered something important. The Wellington mansion was old, built in the 1920s, and it had secret passages that connected different rooms. The original owner had been paranoid about burglars and had built hidden ways for servants to move around without being seen. Rosa had discovered these passages years ago while cleaning, but she had never told anyone about them. One of these passages ran right behind Cassandra's room. Rosa felt a spark of hope. If Cassandra made another phone call, Rosa might be able to hear it from the hidden passage. But hearing wasn't enough. She needed proof that other people would believe. She thought about her daughter Sophia and the smartphone Sophia had bought, her last Christmas. "Mom, you need to learn how this works," Sophia had said, patiently showing Rosa how to use the camera and voice recorder. It's important to keep up with technology. Rosa had mostly used the phone for calling Sophia and taking pictures of flowers in the garden. But now she remembered Sophia showing her the voice recording app. "See, Mom? Just press this button and it records everything. It's great for when you want to remember something important." Rosa pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She had never used it for anything like this before, but she had to try. The recording app was still there, just like Sophia had shown her. Rosa practiced pressing the record button a few times, making sure she knew how it worked. Now she needed to get into position and hope that Cassandra would make another revealing phone call. Rosa made her way to the storage room where the entrance to the secret passage was hidden behind an old bookshelf. She had only been in the passage once before, and it had been dusty and dark. Today, it might be her only chance to save James. She squeezed through the narrow opening and found herself in a space barely wide enough for one person. The passage was pitch black, but Rosa used her phone's flashlight to guide her way. She could hear voices and footsteps from the rooms around her as wedding preparations continued. After what felt like forever, Rosa reached the section of passage that ran behind Cassandra's room. There was a small opening where she could hear clearly into the room. Rosa positioned herself carefully and waited, her phone ready to record. She didn't have to wait long. "Victoria, I need you to listen carefully," came Cassandra's voice from the other side of the wall. She was on the phone again, and she sounded more excited than before. "The wedding is in 3 hours, and I want to go over the plan one more time." Rosa's hands trembled as she pressed the record button on her phone. A small red dot appeared on the screen, indicating that it was working. "After the honeymoon, I'll start phase 1, Cassandra continued. "I'll begin complaining about James to our friends. Nothing too obvious at first. Just little comments about how he works too much, how he doesn't understand me, how we're growing apart. I need to build a foundation for the divorce." Rosa held her breath, making sure not to make any noise that might give her away. "Then in about 6 months, I'll start staying out late and being more distant. I want it to look like I tried to make the marriage work, you know? When I file for divorce, everyone needs to think that James was the problem, not me." Rosa felt sick listening to how calculated and cruel this plan was. Cassandra had thought of everything. "The best part is that James is so trusting," Cassandra laughed. "He'll probably blame himself when things go wrong. He'll think he failed as a husband. It's almost too easy." Rosa's anger grew stronger with every word. How could someone be so heartless? James didn't deserve this betrayal, especially from someone he loved so much. "I've already talked to a divorce lawyer," Cassandra went on. "In this state, since there's no prenup, I'll get at least half of everything. The lawyer thinks I might be able to get even more if I play the victim well enough. Can you imagine? I could walk away with $150 million. Rosa's phone was getting warm in her hands, but she kept recording. This was exactly what she needed. Clear evidence of Cassandra's real intentions. "I have to hang up now," Cassandra said. "The makeup artist is here and I need to start getting ready. Wish me luck on the performance of my life. By tonight, I'll be Mrs. James Morrison, and my future will be secure." The call ended, and Rosa heard footsteps moving away from where she was hidden. She stopped the recording and checked her phone. 7 minutes and 32 seconds of clear audio. She had done it, but now came the hard part. Who could she show this to? Who would believe her and be willing to help? Rosa carefully made her way back through the passage, her mind racing. She couldn't go to the Wellington family. They would never believe their daughter was capable of such deception. She couldn't go to James directly. He was too in love to listen to bad things about Cassandra. As she emerged from the passage, Rosa heard voices in the main hallway. She recognized one of them as David Chen, James's best friend and business partner. Rosa had seen David many times over the years when he came to visit James. He was always polite to the staff and seemed like a good person. More importantly, David was supposed to give a speech at the wedding reception. If anyone could get people's attention and make them listen, it would be him. But would David believe her? And even if he did, would he be willing to ruin his best friend's wedding based on the word of a housekeeper? Rosa took a deep breath and walked toward the hallway where David was talking with another wedding guest. This was her only chance. She had to be brave, like Miguel would have wanted her to be. "Excuse me, Mr. David," Rosa said quietly, approaching him with respectful caution. "Could I please speak with you privately? It's very important." David looked, surprised but nodded politely. "Of course, Rosa. What's wrong?" "You look upset." Rosa glanced around nervously. "Could we go somewhere private? It's about Mr. James, and I think you need to hear this." David's expression grew more serious. He excused himself from his conversation and followed Rosa to a small sitting room away from the wedding preparations. "What's going on, Rosa?" David asked, closing the door behind them. "Is James okay?" Rosa's hands were shaking again. This was it. The moment that would change everything. "Mr. David, I need to tell you something about Miss Cassandra. Something terrible that I heard her say." David frowned. "What do you mean?" "She doesn't love Mr. James," Rosa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's only marrying him for his money. She's planning to divorce him in 2 years and take half of everything he owns." David stared at her for a long moment. Rosa could see the disbelief in his eyes, just as she had expected. "Rosa, that's a very serious accusation," David said carefully. "Are you sure you understood what you heard correctly?" "I have proof," Rosa said, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. "I recorded her talking on the phone. She explained the whole plan." David's eyes widened. "You recorded her?" Rosa nodded and played the recording. She watched David's face change as he listened to Cassandra's cold, calculating voice laying out her scheme to destroy James's life. When the recording ended, David sat in stunned silence. His face had gone pale, and his hands were clenched into fists. "I can't believe this," he whispered. "James has no idea, does he?" Rosa shook her head. "He thinks she loves him. He's so happy, Mr. David. I couldn't let her hurt him like this." David stood up and began pacing around the small room. "We have to stop this wedding," he said. "But how? If we just tell James, he might not believe us. He's so in love with her." "The recording," Rosa suggested. "If people hear her own words—" David stopped pacing and looked at Rosa with new respect. "You're right. Everyone needs to hear this, especially James. But when? And how?" Rosa thought about it for a moment. "At the reception," she said. "When you give your speech. Everyone will be there, including Mr. James. If they all hear it together, she won't be able to deny it or make excuses." David nodded slowly. "That could work. But Rosa, are you sure you want to do this? When this comes out, the Wellington family is going to be furious. You could lose your job." Rosa thought about James's kind smile, about all the ways he had helped her family over the years. Then she thought about Cassandra's cruel laughter as she planned to destroy him. "Some things are more important than keeping a job," Rosa said firmly. "Mr. James is a good man. He doesn't deserve this." David smiled at her with genuine admiration. "You're braver than most people I know, Rosa. James is lucky to have someone like you looking out for him." As they made their plans for the reception, Rosa felt a strange sense of peace. She had found a way to save James, and she had found someone willing to help her do it. In 2 hours, when David played that recording for everyone to hear, Cassandra's cruel plan would be exposed. The wedding was still going to happen, but Rosa was no longer worried about James walking into a trap. By the end of the day, he would know the truth, and he would be free to find someone who truly loved him. Rosa looked out the window at the garden, where guests were already gathering for the ceremony. Soon, this would all be over, and the truth would finally come to light. The wedding ceremony went exactly as planned, at least on the surface. Rosa watched from the staff entrance as 300 guests filled the elegant garden. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows, and flowers bloomed everywhere like something from a fairy tale. The string quartet played beautiful music while everyone waited for the bride. Rosa felt her stomach twist into knots as she saw James standing at the altar. He looked so handsome in his black tuxedo, but more than that, he looked genuinely happy. His smile was bright and real as he waited for the woman he thought loved him. Rosa knew that in a few hours, that smile would be gone forever. When Cassandra appeared in her stunning white dress, the crowd gasped in admiration. She looked like a princess walking down the aisle, her veil flowing behind her like a cloud. Everyone was taking pictures and smiling, completely unaware that they were witnessing an elaborate lie. Rosa watched Cassandra's face as she approached James. To everyone else, she probably looked like a glowing bride. But Rosa could see the coldness behind her eyes, the calculating look of someone closing a business deal. When Cassandra reached the altar and took James's hands, Rosa had to look away. The ceremony itself felt like it lasted forever. Rosa heard the priest talking about love and commitment, about being honest and faithful to each other. Every word felt like a cruel joke. When the priest asked if anyone had a reason why these two should not be married, Rosa's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone might hear it. For a moment, she almost stood up and shouted the truth. But she and David had agreed to wait until the reception when everyone would be together and more relaxed. "You may kiss the bride," the priest announced, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. James and Cassandra kissed while photographers captured the moment. To the guests, it looked like the perfect ending to a beautiful love story. Only Rosa knew it was actually the beginning of a terrible tragedy. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle together, Rosa felt tears running down her cheeks. She wasn't crying from happiness like the other guests. She was crying because she knew that James's joy would be shattered very soon. The reception was held in the mansion's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and tables were decorated with more flowers than Rosa had ever seen in one place. A live band played soft music while guests enjoyed expensive food and champagne. Everyone was laughing and celebrating, having no idea what was coming. Rosa worked quietly in the background, refilling water glasses and clearing plates. She kept looking over at David, who was sitting at the head table with James and Cassandra. David caught her eye a few times and nodded slightly, letting her know he was ready to go through with their plan. James seemed to be having the time of his life. He kept looking at Cassandra with such love and pride, introducing her to guests as my beautiful wife. Every time he said those words, Rosa's heart broke a little more. Cassandra played her part perfectly, smiling and laughing and acting like the happiest woman in the world. Around 9 o'clock, the best man speeches began. 3 of James's friends spoke first, telling funny stories about their friendship and welcoming Cassandra to their group. Everyone laughed and clapped, and the mood in the room was joyful and warm. Finally, it was David's turn. He stood up slowly, looking more serious than Rosa had ever seen him. The room gradually grew quiet as he reached for the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," David began, his voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've known James for 15 years, and I've never seen him as happy as he is today." The crowd murmured their agreement, and James beamed from his seat at the head table. "James is one of the most honest, generous, and trusting people I've ever met," David continued. "He always sees the best in people, sometimes even when he shouldn't." Rosa noticed that David's hands were shaking slightly as he held the microphone. She could see Cassandra looking up at him with a confused smile, probably wondering why his speech sounded so serious. "James, You deserve nothing but the best in life, David said, looking directly at his friend. You deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you have. A few people in the crowd looked puzzled by the odd tone of David's speech. James himself looked a little confused, but was still smiling. Which is why, David said, pulling out Rosa's phone, I think everyone here needs to hear something very important. Especially you, James. The room fell completely silent. Rosa could feel her heart beating so hard it hurt. This was it. There was no going back now. Earlier today, David announced, someone overheard a conversation that I think you all need to hear. This recording was made just a few hours before the wedding ceremony. Cassandra's face went completely white. She stood up from her chair so fast that she knocked over her champagne glass. David, what are you doing? She said loudly. But her voice cracked with panic. I'm telling the truth, David replied calmly. He pressed play on Rosa's phone, and Cassandra's voice filled the ballroom through the sound system. Victoria, I need you to listen carefully. The wedding is in 3 hours, and I want to go over the plan one more time. A gasp went through the crowd as people recognized Cassandra's voice. James looked completely confused, staring at David like he couldn't understand what was happening. After the honeymoon, I'll start phase 1. I'll begin complaining about James to our friends. Nothing too obvious at first, just little comments about how he works too much, how he doesn't understand me, how we're growing apart. The room was so quiet that Rosa could hear people's shocked breathing. At the head table, James had gone pale and was staring at the phone in David's hands like it was a bomb about to explode. The best part is that James is so trusting. He'll probably blame himself when things go wrong. He'll think he failed as a husband. It's almost too easy. Several guests stood up from their tables, some covering their mouths in shock. Others were pulling out their own phones to record what was happening. At the head table, Mrs. Wellington had grabbed her husband's arm and was whispering frantically in his ear. I've already talked to a divorce lawyer. In this state, since there's no prenup, I'll get at least half of everything. The lawyer thinks I might be able to get even more if I play the victim well enough. Can you imagine? I could walk away with $150 million. James slowly stood up from his chair, his face white as paper. He looked at Cassandra with an expression Rosa had never seen before, a mixture of pain, disbelief, and growing anger. By tonight, I'll be Mrs. James Morrison, and my future will be secure, the recording concluded. David turned off the phone and set it down on the table. The ballroom remained completely silent except for the sound of Cassandra's heavy breathing. James, she started to say, her voice shaking. I can explain. Explain what? James interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly through the silent room. Explain how you were planning to destroy my life for money? Explain how everything about our relationship was a lie? Cassandra looked around the room desperately, seeing 300 pairs of eyes staring at her in disgust and disbelief. Some guests were already heading for the doors, probably eager to spread this incredible story to anyone who would listen. You don't understand, Cassandra said, but her voice was getting more panicked. It's not what it sounds like. It sounds exactly like what it is, James said, pulling off his wedding ring and setting it on the table. A con game, and I was the mark. Mrs. Wellington finally found her voice. Cassandra Elizabeth Wellington, she shouted from across the room. How could you do something so horrible? But Cassandra wasn't listening to her mother anymore. She gathered up her dress and ran from the ballroom, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. The crowd parted to let her through, and Rosa watched her disappear through the main entrance, probably heading for her car. The room stayed quiet for another moment before people began talking all at once. Some guests were comforting James. Others were discussing what they had just witnessed in shocked voices. A few were already posting about it on social media, ensuring that this story would be everywhere by morning. David sat down next to James and put a hand on his friend's shoulder. Rosa couldn't hear what they were saying from across the room, but she could see that James was struggling not to cry. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left and the staff had begun cleaning, James found Rosa in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, trying to stay busy and not think about what had just happened. "Rosa," James said quietly from behind her. She turned around, expecting to see anger or blame in his eyes. Instead, she saw something that surprised her: gratitude. "David told me what you did," James said, "how you recorded that conversation and came to him with the truth. I want to thank you." Rosa felt tears starting again. "I'm so sorry, Mr. James. I'm sorry this happened to you." "Don't be sorry," James said firmly. "You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. If you hadn't been brave enough to speak up, I would have spent years being miserable and never understanding why." He paused and looked around the empty kitchen. "I want to offer you something, Rosa. I'm going to need someone to help me manage my household and my life, someone I can trust completely. Would you consider coming to work for me as my estate manager? The salary would be triple what you're making now, plus benefits and a house of your own." Rosa stared at him in amazement. "Mr. James, I don't know what to say." "Say yes." James smiled, and for the first time since the recording had played, he looked genuinely happy. "I need people around me who care more about doing what's right than about protecting themselves. You proved today that you're exactly that kind of person." 6 months later, Rosa was living in a beautiful cottage on James's new property, managing a staff of 12 people and making more money than she had ever dreamed possible. Sophia had been able to quit her part-time job and focus completely on her nursing career. As for Cassandra, her story had become famous on social media and in gossip magazines. Her reputation was completely destroyed, and no wealthy man would go near her. The last Rosa heard, she was working at a regular office job and living in a small apartment, her days of luxury over forever. James had eventually started dating again, but this time he was much more careful. He said Rosa had taught him to pay attention to people's actions, not just their words. Sometimes Rosa thought about that morning when she had hidden behind the armoire, listening to Cassandra's cruel plan. It had been the scariest day of her life, but also the day she learned that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, can change everything for the better. Justice had been served, and the good guys had won.